Hi, I'm Andrea Grimsley.
And I'm Roberta Cook, and we're here for the Art of Podcast.
Today we're going to talk about color, Roberta.
That's exciting.
Okay.
Yes.
So, to begin with, let's demystify color. Everybody is familiar with these guys. Would you hold that one up for me too? Okay, these are our primary colors: yellow, blue, and red. From these three colors, you can make pretty much everything. The things that you can make from these colors are our secondary colors: green, orange, and violet. So, if we pair red and green, we get the highest amount of contrast possible, okay? If you want something to look more red, put it next to something green. If you want something to look more green, put it next to red, and it's the same that follows through. Orange and blue are complementary colors. Violet and yellow are complementary colors. So these colors, when combined with each other, can dull each other down. If something needs to be adjusted, I will add more green to my red. If it's too blue, I'll add more orange. The same here. So all of these tones can be combined to create the exact color that you're looking for. One of the things that people mistake in art is the need for bright colors versus neutral colors. So the same way dark needs light to create contrast, contrast is the language of the eye, color has to work in a similar way. So we have to create contrasts. So that's where all of these tones come in. Roberta, do you have any questions for me about that?
Well, I wondered, in your style of painting, which we see a lot of contrast, I think there's some artists that really don't have a lot of contrast. Is this something that came naturally to you, the way you express color, or is this something that has developed over the years?
It's developed over the years, but I do crave bolder work. Some people, there's work that's called high key, which has a lot of contrast, and there's low key work. The same way we have extroverts and introverts. I personally am an extrovert, which is why I am now being filmed. So, yes, I do like a lot of contrast. I do like my work to have a lot of pop and to have a lot of energy. To me, work that has energy is work that's fun to look at.
So when you're teaching your students, and I know you've been teaching for a long time.
About 1,000 years.
Yeah, I didn't know it was that long.
Well, it just feels that way.
Okay. But do you have to, your inclination is bold and strong. Now, when a student is not that personality, can you appreciate that they do not have the same
Absolutely.
approach as you?
Absolutely. I encourage my students to be themselves in whatever way that manifests. I've got students that are very quiet. I've got students that are very much out and loud and happy and communicative. So when you work with a variety of people, you learn to appreciate that the quiet student has just as much to offer and is maybe has a much different voice, but a much more powerful voice than someone who just uses a lot of color. So that's where using color effectively comes into play. Color is a language, so it's about becoming fluent with what each one of them does.
Well, that sounds like is what makes you a great teacher. Yes. So, do you think that we can take this further and maybe see more about the process you use?
I would be happy to do
we'll
that.
see some finished work of yours.
Okay.
And then I think it would be fascinating for everyone to see how that process works, how you
Okay.
get started.
Okay.
And hopefully you can talk us through what you're doing.
I will try to do that. There is always a magical element in these things, which I am grateful for. So hopefully the muse will join us today, and we're going to do a floral piece. Roberta so kindly brought me a bouquet, and I've got it set up back here. I'm going to be working in acrylics today, which is that's one of my other mediums. Mainly I work in oils. The pieces that you're going to see that Roberta has so kindly brought in are pieces that are oil and canvas. But today it's going to be acrylics.
So real quickly though, now you said the magic and the muse, so that's an element in your creations?
Yes.
And is that a sort of a sort of spiritual or just a intervention of creativity
Well,
that is outside of yourself?
there is a woo-woo aspect, yes. And that's a technical term.
What was that?
Woo-woo.
Woo-woo.
Woo-woo. Woo!
Oh,
Yes, the thing that keeps this interesting to me, because I've been painting for most of my life, is that when I go into these things, I never really know what's going to happen, which is a little bit like being a cliff diver, and you never know whether the tide is going to be just right or whether you're going to be flat on the rocks. So I like taking that plunge. I think that's fun. I think it's fun to not necessarily know where you're going to wind up. It's kind of like a road trip without a destination on a very small scale. So that's how I approach my creativity.
I'm chomping at the bit.
Okay,
to
well,
see you get started.
Let's put some aprons on.
All right. So why don't you tell us, this is a piece that I actually have, and it really drew my husband and myself into it. We both got different feelings from it, but we both love it. And so I'm love to hear the story behind it and what
Okay.
inspired you.
Okay, great.
Great.
One of the things that I do when I paint in my studio at home is listen to music. And I am a real fan of old jazz. So I listened to, as I was doing this piece, I was listening to Bill Evans at the Vanguard. So for me, and I know this is very different than what Roberta and her husband see because they each see something different. But for me, what I see is a piano player. And this is the side of the piano. So one of the things that I loved about the way that he played was that it was very free form, and it has dark moments and brighter moments. The great thing about working in oils is that it's very responsive. You can see the brush strokes, you can see the details. I like to work with a lot of paint. I mix up big piles of paint. And I work with big, heavy hog bristle brushes, which are they're stiff. So they give me lots of bounce. And I work from the shoulder. I do a lot of things like this is a scrape out where I've just taken the edge of my thumb and just scrape that out. So what I do is something that I call action reaction. I lay something down and I decide, do I want to keep it? Do I want to enhance it? Do I want to bury it? If something is sticking out a little too much to me, then I will find a way to pull it back. A lot of things I lay down with a single stroke. This is a single stroke. This is a single stroke. Those are the things that I do to finalize. I usually start off, and a lot of times we'll work from the sides in. Occasionally I will start off with some sort of a contrasty kind of I think of it as a frame to hang the composition on. And then I just start to balance things back and forth and back and forth. So that's really my approach to a piece like this. I love to work large. Again, I don't tell my students, but I don't do any thumbnails, which I require them to do on everything we do, because it's a great way to think about where you're going to go. But for something like this, to me, spontaneity was the most important thing. After many, many, many years of doing lots of different kinds of artwork, I've done a lot of realistic painting, and I can do realistic painting. But to me, this is so engaging because I don't know where it's going to go. I don't have an answer. I have to find an answer. I have to discover an answer. And that, to me, is what makes me an explorer. And that's what keeps it fun and fresh for me.
Okay, so Andrea is getting started here, and I wanted to ask, so when you're painting and coming up with all these gorgeous colors, you only use the primary colors to create all the different ones?
It depends. I mean, sometimes I do. Today, I think I'm probably going to use some extras. I've got like a teal blue, which is comparable to a phthalo blue. I also brought in some purple, but otherwise, I've just got our old pals, red, yellow, and blue. So.
And this is where all the color comes from, is right here. And is that what you do, ask your students to do too?
Yes, I oftentimes like to have them do these three because from these three you can get a really nice range. The one thing that I don't like my students to use is black because it makes everything very, very heavy and dark. If you want to keep your color light and bright and open and free, stay with these types of tones. Black is just a whole different chemical. I mean, basically, this is all chemistry. This is all, I mean, everything boils down to chemistry and physics, basically.
Well, and you can create a pretty dark
You can.
tone
Absolutely.
with what you have right
Yes,
here.
absolutely.
When you
absolutely can. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just start to lay some color in. We've got kind of a dark corner over here. Shadows a lot of times go very purple. The thing about working with any kind of white is that it has a lot of different tones in it. White is capable of reflecting a lot of things that are behind it. I like to work in a situation where my warm tones are on one side and my cool tones are on another. This is what I paint. As we lay this in, we'll start to see some other tones. Gives me a chance to work with the shape a little bit. So I think I'm going to go for kind of a neutral background on this. Got a lot of oranges in this, so I'm going to go for kind of a neutral blue background. So let's do blue, we add a little orange. Let's do green, we got a little red. Mix that back up into that. So as we lay these tones in, you can also mix some other things in, just for fun. I just do what I'm told. I'm teaching my students about fauvism, and they're still a little mystified by it, but this is pretty much what fauvism is. So basically, you have to get some tones in so that you have something to work with. By starting with a toned canvas, you give yourself the ability to set up your color palette, but you also, it really helps to get rid of all that white. That white can be very, very confusing, particularly for new painters. If you're having trouble visualizing what's going on, get rid of that white as quick as you can, because that's the only way that you're going to understand how to do the value study. The thing with acrylics is that they go down thin, so you want to be able to keep working over them. Using color, the same color in multiple spots, is also kind of a traditional approach to creating unity in a painting. Greens can be a very strange thing to work with. Greens are a color that can be very, very harsh. A lot of the synthetic greens that are sold are very, very unnatural looking. So as painters, we have to be very careful about how we mix our greens and how that works. A lot of times things like colors like phthalo right out of the tube can be just incredibly harsh and not feel at all natural.
So Andrea, we're all observing here how you are kind of loose and free with your brush strokes, and your arms seem so relaxed. It's like, is this the way you've always painted, or is this a technique you've developed?
Well, I was a sign painter and a muralist for many years. And I always had tight deadlines. Sometimes I was working outside and I was working against weather, and I just developed a really fast style because as a self-employed person, the faster you work, the more money you make. So, which I always found very appealing. But I can cover bigger areas. I'm used to working on walls and signs, and I'm used to, hanging off buildings on scaffoldings and climbing ladders and doing those sorts of things. And so in order for me to be effective at that, I needed to develop a style that was very quick, that was very fast. And so that's a big part of why I work the way I do, is because I've needed to.
Easy. It looks easy. Of course it isn't. I don't know if any of you have tried to do abstract art. It's very difficult.
Everything's easy when you know how, though. I mean, it's...
Right. But I think there are some that have the false impression that this isn't as hard or as, nuanced as realistic art.
Well,
I used the wrong word. What you're doing is much more nuanced than, things that look exactly, art that looks exactly like the subject.
I have a great deal of respect for realist art. However, my problem with that is that if I want an exact image of something, I would just as soon take a photograph. And I do love photography. But I don't necessarily feel the need to paint every aspect of something. I think it's more interesting to pick and choose what you're going to focus on.
What do you hope your viewers or people that are looking at your work, what do you hope it exudes from them?
Happiness. Happiness.
I am so happy right now.
Oh, good. I am too, actually.
I am fascinated with your technique, and I just look at this and I want to smile.
Well,
broadly.
That's the way art makes me feel. And that's what I like. That's what I like to do. I like to be in a position where, you can contribute to a world that's a little bit happier. Because let's face it, there's plenty of things that aren't very happy going on all the time. It's always been the case. The world has always been a hard place and probably always will be. But that's what art does. Art is that thing that reminds us that we are evolved creatures. We are capable of great magic and real compassion and real love. To be able to exalt nature in this way, to me, is really important. I think a lot of times, too, people are just too hard on themselves. If things don't look like something they've seen before, if something, all one person will have to say is, oh, I don't like that. Well, you know what? That's okay. That person doesn't have to like everything you do. We have to be willing to take risks. It's risky just getting out of bed anymore. So you have to be willing to do that. You have to be willing to take that leap, to make that jump. Well, I think we're getting pretty close here to something that's actually looks like a painting.
It's so fascinating to see how many different evolutions of background color we've experienced today on this work.
There we go.
Thank you, Andrea. What a treat. It was a real rare experience to see a master complete a work.
Well, thank you. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you so much. We've appreciated your time. Roberta Cook, thank you for being here. I'm Andrea Grimsley, and this is The Art of Podcast.